The air in our garden buzzed with a perfect storybook happiness. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree, painting shifting patterns on the manicured lawn. Pink and blue balloons, tied to every chair and post, danced in the gentle breeze, their ribbons twirling like happy little snakes. The sweet smell of vanilla cake and fresh-cut grass hung in the air, a perfume of pure joy. Our friends and family, a sea of smiling faces, surrounded us, their eyes filled with excitement and love. They were all here for us, for our baby, to share in the biggest moment of our lives so far. In the very center of the lawn stood a giant, mysterious black box, tied shut with a big, shiny gold ribbon. Inside that box was the secret everyone was waiting to learn. Would our life be filled with pink or with blue? My husband, Leo, stood beside me, his arm wrapped tightly around my waist, pulling me close to his side. To everyone else, it looked like a loving embrace. But I could feel the tension in his muscles. His arm felt less like a hug and more like a clamp, holding me in place for the show he was about to produce. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Ready for the surprise of your life, my love?" His voice was smooth, like honey, but I could hear the sharp, ugly thing hiding beneath it. I turned and gave him a calm, knowing smile that he completely misunderstood. He saw the smile of a happy, clueless wife, a woman so blinded by love that she couldn't see the cliff she was about to be pushed off. He had no idea I could already see the bottom, and that I had a net waiting for me. Together, we walked towards the box, the crowd cheering us on. We placed our hands on the thick golden ribbon. A hush fell over the garden as our friend started the countdown. 3, 2, 1. The voices were a single, excited shout. We pulled. The ribbon came undone, and the four sides of the big black box fell away with a soft thud. But there was no explosion of color. There was no joyful cloud of pink or blue smoke that shot up into the sky. Instead, a silent flurry of white paper sheets erupted from the box, fluttering and spinning down around us like sad winter snow on a perfect summer day. I heard the gasps first. A collective, sharp intake of breath from 50 people at once. The happy music from the speakers sputtered and died. The garden, once buzzing with life, was suddenly deathly quiet. A piece of the white confetti landed on my shoe. I looked down, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm, not with panic, but with anticipation. The letters were black and sharp, like little knives against the clean white paper. In big, bold letters it read, "Petition for divorce." The world seemed to slow down. I could see every shocked face in the crowd. My best friend's hand flew to her mouth. Leo's mother looked utterly confused. And then I saw her, standing near the front, partially hidden behind a rose bush. Chloe, Leo's mistress. A smug little smile was playing on her lips. This was their masterpiece, their moment of ultimate victory. Leo let go of me as if I were suddenly on fire. He stepped forward, grabbing the microphone from the stand nearby. His face, which minutes ago had been a mask of the loving husband, was now twisted into a cruel, triumphant smirk. He thought this was his shining moment. "Surprise, everyone," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers, shattering the fragile silence. "Looks like we're not having a baby shower after all. We're having a divorce party." He turned to look right at me, his eyes as cold and hard as stones. He was waiting. He was expecting me to crumble, to burst into tears, to fall to my knees, broken and humiliated in front of everyone we knew. "Amelia and I are finished," he continued, enjoying the power of his words. "I've realized I can't be tied down to a crying, pregnant woman for the rest of my life. I deserve to be happy." The pity on the faces of our guests was almost painful to watch. They were looking at me like I was a wounded animal. Leo puffed out his chest, soaking in the drama he had created, waiting for my breakdown. But it never came. Instead, I bent down gracefully, my hand supporting my back, and picked up one of the divorce papers from the grass. I looked at it for a moment, then used it to gently fan my face, as if I were feeling a little warm from the sun. A small, serene smile touched my lips. I looked up and met Leo's gaze. His confident smirk was just beginning to falter, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Then, I walked over to the second microphone, the one that I was supposed to use to joyfully announce the gender of our child. I tapped it once. The sharp thump-thump echoed through the silent garden, making several people jump. Every eye was on me. I took a deep breath, looked at the pale, confused face of the man I once called my husband, and leaned into the microphone. "Thank you for that little show, Leo," I said, my voice perfectly calm and clear, carrying across the lawn. "But my announcement is a little more important. To understand why I wasn't crying on the lawn, surrounded by divorce papers, you have to see the life Leo had so carefully built for me. It wasn't really my life at all. It was more like a beautiful picture frame, shiny and golden on the outside for everyone to admire, but on the inside there was nothing but empty space. I was just the painting he had placed there, smiling and silent. We met 2 years ago, in a way that felt like it was written for a movie. I was a librarian, a job I adored. I loved the quiet, the smell of old paper, and the feeling of connecting people with stories. He walked in one afternoon, looking for a rare book on ancient architecture. He was so different from anyone I'd ever met. He was handsome, dressed in an expensive suit, but his smile was what caught me. It was dazzling, and it made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He said he was impressed by my knowledge, by my quiet confidence. I felt my cheeks flush. No one had ever described me that way. He stayed for an hour, and we talked about books and dreams. When he left, he had my phone number. That was the beginning of the whirlwind. He showered me with attention. He took me to fancy restaurants where the waiters knew his name, to art galleries, to weekend trips in his sports car. It was a fairy tale. He made me feel seen and special in a way I never had before. I, a simple librarian, was being courted by this incredible worldly man. When he asked me to marry him 6 months later, on a private boat under a sky full of stars, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Of course, I said yes. After the wedding, things began to change, but so slowly and gently that I barely noticed at first. The first golden bar of my cage was put in place when he asked me to quit my job. "A man like me should be able to provide for his wife," he'd said, smiling that perfect smile. "You don't need to work, darling. Just focus on being beautiful and making our home a paradise for us." I was so drunk on love that I thought it was the most romantic gesture in the world. I said goodbye to the library, to my colleagues, to my own small paycheck. I didn't realize I was also saying goodbye to my independence. Next came the finances. He set up a joint bank account, but I never saw a statement. He gave me a credit card with a generous limit, he said, for whatever my heart desires. But it was an allowance, not a partnership. When I once asked if we could sit down and go over our budget together, just so I could understand, he simply patted my head like I was a child. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about boring things like that, my sweet, simple girl," he'd said, his tone soft but firm. "That's what I'm here for." He loved calling me that. Simple. At first, I thought it was a term of endearment. I slowly realized it was what he needed me to be. Simple, so I wouldn't ask questions. Simple, so I wouldn't challenge him. Our home was a mansion in the wealthiest part of town, but it never felt like mine. He had hired a famous interior designer to decorate it in shades of gray, white, and chrome. It was cold and perfect, like a magazine cover. He picked out all the furniture, all the art, all the soulless sculptures. My own colorful paintings and worn, beloved books were packed away into boxes and kept in a small room upstairs he called my hobby room. When we had guests, he was the perfect host, and I was his perfect accessory. He would put his arm around me, call me his queen, and kiss my hand. Everyone told me how lucky I was. "Leo just adores you," they'd say. And I would smile and nod, because I desperately wanted to believe it too. But at night, when the guests were gone and the house was silent, a a vast emptiness would settle over me. It was the feeling of being a ghost in someone else's perfect life. When I found out I was pregnant, I was filled with a desperate kind of joy. I thought a baby would change everything. A baby would fill the empty rooms with laughter and warmth. A baby would finally make our house a real home. When I told Leo, he smiled and hugged me tightly, but when I looked into his eyes, I saw something else. It wasn't joy. It was a flicker of something cold and calculating. That should have been my first real warning sign. He wasn't seeing a son or a daughter. He was seeing an anchor, a complication to a life he wanted to keep simple. My simple girl was about to make his perfect life very, very complicated. The fairy tale began to crumble just a few months into my pregnancy, the beautiful picture frame cracking from the inside out. It started not with a bang, but with whispers. Our house was large, with long hallways and heavy doors, and suddenly, those doors were always closed. I'd walk towards his study and hear the low murmur of Leo's voice, only for it to stop the second my hand touched the doorknob. When I entered, he'd be staring at his phone, a blank expression on his face. "Just a business call, darling," he would say, not looking up. "You know how it is." But the air in the room would be thick with secrets, and the hurried way he ended the calls felt less like business and more like guilt. Then came the late nights. His work meetings started stretching later and later into the evening. He would come home long after I had gone to bed, slipping under the covers silently. He always smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. It was a flowery, expensive scent, the kind that lingers in a room after a woman has left. The first time I smelled it, my heart did a painful little flip. I told myself I was being paranoid. The second time, a cold dread began to seep into my bones. By the fourth or fifth time, the scent was no longer a question. It was an answer. He became cold, irritable. The loving words and tender touches disappeared, replaced by a dismissive impatience. This change became especially sharp after the pregnancy was public knowledge. It was as if the reality of the baby, of our shared future, was a cage he was desperate to escape. I tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing chasm between us. I'd try to discuss names for the baby or show him the tiny sonogram picture, and he would just wave a hand and say, "Whatever you think is best, Amelia." He was a stranger living in my husband's skin. The loneliness was a physical weight. I was living in this huge, beautiful house pregnant with our child, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. One evening, while doing his laundry, I found a receipt tucked into his suit pocket. It was from a week prior, from one of the city's most romantic and expensive restaurants, a place I'd tried to book for our anniversary, only to be told by Leo that it was impossible to get a reservation. The receipt was for 2 main courses and a bottle of champagne. My hands trembled as I held the flimsy piece of paper. This was it. This was proof. I waited up for him that night, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs. When he finally came in, I held it out to him. "You told me this place was fully booked," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at the receipt, and for a split second, I saw a flash of pure panic in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, condescending laugh. He took the paper from my hand and crumpled it into a ball. "Oh, Amelia," he sighed, shaking his head as if I were a child who had just done something incredibly stupid. I was with a client, a very important one. "Are you seriously accusing me of something right now?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You know, this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. You're being a crazy, hormonal pregnant woman. You need to calm down before you hurt the baby." He made me feel so small, so foolish, so utterly insane that I actually took a step back and apologized. I apologized to him for finding evidence of his betrayal. After that night, I stopped trying. I retreated into myself. The only person I could stand to be around was his grandmother, Beatrice. She was the matriarch of the family, a sharp, intelligent woman with kind eyes that missed nothing. She invited me for tea every week, and her warm, book-filled home was a sanctuary from the cold silence of my own. Unlike everyone else, she didn't just ask how I was feeling. She truly listened. I found myself telling her things I couldn't tell anyone else, about my fears, my crushing loneliness, about how Leo seemed like a different person. She would just nod slowly, her hand resting gently on mine. "Men can be fools, my dear," she once said, her gaze firm and knowing. "Especially men who have been given too much too easily." She never spoke badly of Leo, but in her eyes I found a deep, unwavering understanding. She saw what was happening. She knew I wasn't crazy. Those afternoons with Beatrice were the only moments I felt strong. She was a lighthouse in a gathering storm, and little did I know, she was already plotting a course to guide me through it. One Tuesday afternoon, about a month before the gender reveal, my phone rang. It was Beatrice. Her voice, usually so strong and full of life, was weak and thin, like a thread about to snap. "Amelia, dear," she said, her words quiet but urgent. "I need you to come see me, and I need you to come alone. Don't tell Leo." A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. The way she said it, I knew this wasn't for our usual tea and conversation. This was something else. I promised I would, and drove to her grand estate with my hands trembling on the steering wheel, 1,000 worries racing through my mind. I found her in her study, a room that smelled of old books and beeswax. She looked so small and frail in her large wing-backed armchair, a soft blanket draped over her legs. But her eyes, when they met mine, were as sharp and intelligent as ever. Standing quietly by the fireplace was her lawyer, a kind-faced, serious man named Mr. Hemlock. My heart sank. A lawyer. This was bad. "Amelia, sit down," Beatrice said, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "We don't have time for small talk." I did as she asked, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. She got straight to the point. "I am not a fool, and I have not been blind. I know about my grandson. I know about his greed, and I know about that little parasite, Chloe." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. All the secrets I had been holding, all the pain I had been hiding, was suddenly out in the open. She knew. She actually knew. Beatrice reached out a pale, thin hand and placed it on my arm. "I hired a private investigator weeks ago," she confessed, her voice filled with a deep, weary sadness. "I had to be sure. He is planning to leave you, Amelia. He is waiting for the right moment, a moment where he can hurt you the most. He is waiting for me to pass on, believing that he will inherit everything. He plans to take the family money and be free to live his life with that girl, leaving you and my great-grandchild with absolutely nothing." Tears I didn't even know I was holding back began to well up in my eyes, but she squeezed my arm gently. "Do not cry, my child. We are not going to let that happen." What she told me next made my head spin. It was so audacious, so brilliant, that it felt like a dream. Mr. Hemlock stepped forward and opened his worn leather briefcase. He laid a thick, ribbon-bound document on the polished table between us. It was Beatrice's last will and testament. "I have had Mr. Hemlock make some adjustments," Beatrice said, a faint, steely smile touching her lips. She explained that she had created a special trust. Into that trust, she was putting everything: the family's international company, all the properties across the country, this very house, and the entire fortune her husband had spent his life building. And her will now clearly stated that the trust would be controlled by one person, and one person only: the mother of her first great-grandchild, me. I stared at her, speechless. I couldn't form words. The power would transfer to me the moment the baby was born. "Until your child turns 21, Beatrice explained, her eyes locking with mine, a silent transfer of power passing between us. "You, Amelia, will be the head of this family. You will control everything. Leo will have nothing but a small monthly allowance that you approve." I finally found my voice, a choked whisper. "But why?" Beatrice's smile softened. Because I have watched you for 2 years, my dear. Leo brought you into this family, and it is the only wise thing he has ever done. You are kind, you are smart, and you are far stronger than you know. You will be a wonderful mother, and you will protect this family's legacy from the one person who would destroy it, my own grandson. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. This is my final gift, to you and to the baby. But you must be brave. You cannot let him know. You must wait for him to make his move, and then, and only then, you will show him what a simple girl can really do. I left her house that day with a certified copy of the will tucked inside my purse. It felt as heavy as a brick, but it also felt like a shield. I was no longer a victim waiting for the axe to fall. I was a guardian, a secret queen, waiting for the perfect moment to claim my throne. 2 weeks after that life-altering meeting, Beatrice passed away peacefully in her sleep. A wave of genuine sadness washed over me. I had lost the only true ally I had in this family, the one person who saw me for who I really was. Our family was officially in mourning, but I saw a different emotion in Leo's eyes, a disgusting emotion he barely tried to hide, greedy anticipation. He put on a magnificent performance of being the grieving grandson. He gave a moving speech at the funeral, his voice cracking at all the right moments. But when he thought no one was looking, I would catch a glimpse of the truth, a flicker of excitement in his eyes, a small, impatient tap of his fingers against his thigh. He was like a child on Christmas Eve, waiting to unwrap the biggest present of all. He truly believed he was just days away from becoming one of the richest men in the city. He had no idea that his wise old grandmother, with a single brilliant stroke of her pen, had already given the entire kingdom away to someone else. I kept our secret locked away deep inside my heart. It was a heavy but powerful weight, a silent promise I had made to Beatrice. I grieved for her, but her final gift had ignited something within me. A fire. I was no longer just a victim of Leo's cruelty. I was the guardian of my child's future, the protector of a legacy. My purpose was clear now, and it gave me a strength I never knew I possessed. With Beatrice gone, Leo's behavior became even worse. It was as if the last chain of decency holding him back had been broken. He and Chloe grew bolder, no longer caring about appearances. He stopped making excuses for his late nights. He'd come home smelling of her perfume and not even bother to lie about it. I once saw a picture of them online, posted by one of Chloe's friends. They were having lunch at a fancy outdoor cafe, laughing, Chloe's hand resting intimately on his. He thought I was too broken by grief, or too stupid, or too absorbed in my pregnancy to notice. He saw me as a temporary problem that would soon be solved. Then he came up with the idea for the gender reveal party. "It has to be huge, Amelia," he insisted one evening, his eyes gleaming with a strange, manic energy. "Everyone has to be there. All of our friends, our family, my business associates. We need to make it a day that no one will ever forget." A cold chill ran down my spine, because I knew exactly what he was planning. He wasn't celebrating our baby. He was building a stage. He wanted the biggest possible audience for my public humiliation. The bigger the party, the harder my fall would be. An old, weaker version of me would have fought him on it, would have cried and refused. But the new me, the me that Beatrice had armed with a powerful secret, just smiled sweetly. "That's a wonderful idea, darling," I said, my voice smooth as silk. He looked surprised but pleased. He thought he was getting his way so easily. So I let him plan everything. I watched him with a quiet, detached calm, like a scientist observing an insect. I smiled and nodded as he chose the most expensive caterer, the most elaborate decorations, and the ridiculously large black box for the reveal. He was so proud of himself, so sure of his brilliant, cruel plan. He had no idea that every balloon he ordered, every chair he rented, was just another piece of the perfect trap he was setting for himself. He thought he was weaving a web to catch and destroy me. In reality, he was just a fly, and I was the spider, patiently waiting. Every time he looked at me with that fake pity in his eyes, I had to physically stop myself from smiling. Every time he made a sarcastic comment about my pregnancy brain, I held my tongue and pretended to be flustered. I was playing a role, the part of the fragile, naive, unsuspecting wife. It was the greatest performance of my life. The day of the party finally arrived. As I stood in front of my bedroom mirror getting dressed, I looked at my reflection. I didn't see a weak, scared woman on the verge of being broken. I saw a queen, calm and composed, preparing for battle. I chose a simple, elegant white dress that showed off my growing belly. I wanted everyone to see exactly what he was throwing away. I placed a hand over my stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of my baby moving inside me. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered to the reflection. "Mommy has everything under control." I took one last deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked down the stairs, ready to let my husband walk straight into the beautiful, perfect web we had set for him. And so, there I stood, in the wreckage of my own party. The garden was unnervingly silent, the happy music long dead. The divorce papers, the confetti of Leo's cruelty, littered the perfect green grass around my feet. His ugly words still hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He was still standing there, his chest puffed out like a rooster, but the triumphant smirk on his face had collapsed into a confused frown. He couldn't process it. He had detonated the bomb he had so carefully built, and I was still standing, completely unharmed. He had expected a mushroom cloud of tears, screams, and begging. He did not expect my calm, steady smile. He did not expect the silence. I let that silence stretch, letting it grow heavy and uncomfortable for everyone, especially for him. I enjoyed the look of raw uncertainty that was slowly seeping into his eyes, a look I had never seen there before. I watched the smug, victorious expression on Chloe's face begin to melt like ice cream in the sun. This wasn't going according to their script. The victim wasn't playing her part. I lifted the microphone to my lips, the cool metal a comfort in my hand. "Thank you, Leo," I began, my voice ringing out with a strength that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. It was as clear and solid as a bell. "Thank you for this paperwork. It's always good to be organized." A few nervous, uncertain chuckles rippled through the stunned crowd. I looked directly at him, pinning him with my gaze. "But you seem to be a little confused about the order of things today." "You see," I said, taking a deliberate step towards him, "you can't really divorce me and leave me with nothing because you, my dear husband, have nothing to give." Leo let out a short, ugly bark of a laugh. It sounded forced and hollow. "What are you talking about, Amelia? Have you finally lost your mind? The grief, the hormones? It's all gone to your head. I'm about to inherit everything." "Are you?" I asked, my voice dangerously sweet. I reached into the small, elegant purse hanging from my shoulder. My hand didn't tremble. I felt a strange, icy calm. I pulled out a single, folded document. It was the certified copy of Beatrice's final will. I unfolded it slowly and held it up for everyone to see. "I believe this says something a little different. This is a copy of your grandmother's last will and testament, certified by her lawyer, Mr. Hemlock, who I believe is standing right over there by the hydrangeas." I gestured to the back of the crowd, where the kind-faced lawyer, true to his word, gave a slight professional nod. A new wave of murmurs swept through the guests. I saw Leo's eyes dart towards Mr. Hemlock, and for the first time, a genuine flicker of fear appeared on his face. "Beatrice was a very, very smart woman," I continued, my voice growing stronger, more confident with every word. I was no longer whispering in the shadows. I was commanding the stage he had built for me. She knew you, Leo. She knew your character. She knew your greed. And more than anything, she wanted to protect her family's future, her real family. I took another step closer, closing the distance between us. His face was starting to lose its healthy, tanned color. "Her will states that her entire fortune The company, this house, and every single thing she owned has been placed into a trust that is to be managed by one person and one person only. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting the tension build to a breaking point. The entire garden was so quiet you could hear a bird chirping in a distant tree. I placed my free hand on my round belly, a gesture that was both maternal and powerful. That trust is to be controlled by the mother of her first great-grandchild, starting from the moment of the baby's birth. I let them connect the dots. The collective gasp from the crowd was a huge, satisfying rush of air. "So you see, Leo," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but in the dead silence, it carried to every corner of the garden. "You don't own any of this anymore." I held up the will. "I do." The look on his face, it was a masterpiece of horror. It turned from tan to pale, to a ghostly, horrifying white. The confident, cruel man who had tried to destroy me just moments ago completely vanished. In his place stood a terrified little boy who had just had all his toys taken away. The look of triumph was gone, replaced by pure, raw, white-hot fear. The aftermath was instant, beautiful chaos. The silence of the garden shattered into 100 different whispers, gasps, and murmurs. It was like a spell had been broken. Leo just stood there, frozen, his mouth hanging open in a silent, ugly "oh." He looked from the will in my hand to my face, then to Mr. Hemlock, then back to me, his mind clearly short-circuiting, unable to process the new reality that had just crashed down upon him. Standing behind him, Chloe looked like she had seen a ghost. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of pale shock and disbelief. The future she had so smugly envisioned, a life of luxury with my husband and his family's money, had just evaporated into thin air right before her eyes. But I wasn't finished. They had wanted a public spectacle, and I was going to give them one. I turned my attention from Leo's crumbling face back to our stunned audience. Leo also forgot to mention the reason for this sudden, dramatic divorce, I announced, my voice dripping with ice. He has been having an affair with that woman right there. I raised my arm and pointed a steady, unwavering finger directly at Chloe. For over a year, while I was at home making a life for us, carrying his child, he was taking her to fancy restaurants and buying her expensive gifts with money he foolishly thought would one day be his. Every single eye in that garden swiveled to Chloe. She flinched as if she'd been physically struck. The smugness was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked shame. She looked like she wanted the manicured lawn to open up and swallow her whole. The game was over. The checkmate was absolute. They had not only lost, they had been exposed as the cheap, cruel people they truly were. I turned back to Leo. He was finally moving, trembling, a mixture of pathetic rage and raw panic swirling in his eyes. He looked like a cornered animal. "So, about these divorce papers," I said, my voice calm and businesslike. I bent down and picked one up from the ground, holding it between my thumb and forefinger as if it were a piece of trash. "I accept, but my lawyer will be in touch with yours to discuss my terms. They will be generous, I'm sure." The sarcasm in my voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "And as for you," I looked him dead in the eye, my voice low and firm, leaving absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. "This is no longer your house. This is my house, Beatrice's house, soon my child's house. I want you to go upstairs, pack your things, and be gone. You have 24 hours. His parents, who had been frozen in the crowd, finally rushed forward, their faces a mess of confusion and horror. "Amelia, what is the meaning of this?" his father stammered, looking at me as if he'd never truly seen me before. I met his gaze without flinching. "The meaning is that Beatrice knew her son better than anyone. She saw his greed and she protected her legacy from it. I am simply following her final wishes." Leo finally found his voice, but it wasn't the booming, confident tone he had used at the microphone. It was a pathetic, desperate squeak. "You can't do this to me." "I can," I replied, the words solid as stone. "And I am." I turned my back on him then, a simple gesture that signaled he was completely and utterly dismissed from my life. That was the last thing I said to him that day. I didn't need to say anything more. I walked away from the mess he had created, away from the shattered pieces of our old life. My true friends, the ones who had looked horrified by his actions and not by my reaction, immediately gathered around me, their faces full of awe, relief, and unwavering support. The party was over, but my life, my real life, was just beginning. Standing there on the lawn, under the now ironic pink and blue balloons, I placed a protective hand on my belly. We were safe now. We were secure. We were strong. I was no longer Leo's sweet, simple girl living in his golden cage. I was the head of the table, a mother, a protector, and the powerful, resilient woman that Beatrice had always known I was. And as the sun began to set on the ruins of my old life, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was ready to build a wonderful future, not with a man's money or on a man's terms, but with my own two hands and with my own strength.